Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishnah Yisukah, Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah 6. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, the sage Rabbi Eliezer said, Arbe Esrei Seudais, 14 meals. Chayev Adam Lachol B'Sukkah, is a person obligated to eat in the Sukkah. Achas Bayoyim, V'achas Balayla, one by day, one by night. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you must every day of Sukkot. You must make sure to have a meal at night and a meal by day. That's your obligation. Where's obligation based on? Obligation is based on the fact that we have been learning that we say Basukkas Teishvu, it says you shall dwell in a sukkah, Teishvu Kain Taduru. The way you live in a sukkah should resemble the way you live at home. The times of the Mishnah, people had 2 meals a day, one by day and one by night. And therefore, if that's the way you live in your house, that's how you have to live in your sukkah. And therefore, you have to eat a meal by day and by night, totaling 14 over sukkahs, according to Eliezer. And the Chachamim say, Ein l'davar kitzvah. There is no fixed requirement. Chutz mileila yomtiv, other than chutz mileila yomtiv rishon shal chag bovad. The only time there's an obligation is the first night of sukkahs. So the Chachamim say, there is no set requirement. Other than the first night of Sukkot, from the point of the mitzvah of Sukkah, you don't have to eat in the Sukkah. What does that mean, you have to eat in the Sukkah? It means, other than the first night you must eat a meal in the Sukkah. That is derived from the fact there's a comparison between Sukkot and Pesach. The same way on the night of the 15th of Nisan of Pesach, you have to eat matzah. On the night of the 15th of Tishrei, which is Sukkot, you've got to eat a meal of bread in the sukkah. Not matzah, but bread. Okay? That's the obligation. All the other days of sukkahs, from the point of the mitzvah of sukkah, the halacha is, if you decide to have a meal, eat in the sukkah. You don't want to have a meal, you don't want to eat, don't eat in the sukkah. Now, it's not as simple as that, because if it's yontif, like the first day, or outside of Eretz Yisrael, the first 2 days, when you're talking about the beginning of yontif, and the end of Yontif, which in case of Sukkot is, you've got, at least according to Eretz Yisrael, according to the Torah law is, you have the first day of Sukkot is Yontif, you have Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day is Yontif. On those days, because it is Yontif, you have an obligation to have a meal in honor of Yontif. Once you're having a meal, it's got to be in the Sukkah. But it's not a Sukkah obligation. It's not from the point of the mitzvah of Sukkah. It's because it's Yontif. It's Shabbos, it's Yontif. On Shabbos Cholamai, you have to have a meal also, because it's Shabbos. But from the point of the mitzvah of Sukkah, practically speaking, Cholamai during the week, you want to fast? You can fast.
I don't think you can fast, can you?
But the right to use the words Yis'ana, you can fast. That's practically speaking, we got to look up into that. But he says, unless it's just a way, but clearly you don't have to have a meal. Clearly you don't have to have a meal. Okay? And therefore, even on Yom Tif, where you're having a meal, it's got to be in the sukkah. That's not because of sukkah. It's because Shabbos obligates you, or Yom Tov obligates you to have a meal. Once you're having a meal, it's got to be in the sukkah. So therefore, the point of the Chachamim is that Rebbe Eliezer says you have to have a meal by day and by night. He goes as far to say that you're living in the sukkah to resemble the way you are in your house, to the extent that just as you eat at home, just the amount of meals you have at home is the amount of meals you have to have in your sukkah. But the Chachamim say we don't take it that far, and at the end of the day, there is only an obligation on the first night of Sukkot it's an obligation to eat in the sukkah. You have to eat in the sukkah the first night a meal of bread. Now, and that's a Torah obligation, not just a rabbinic obligation for the point of Yontif. It's a Torah obligation to have to make sure to eat the first night of Sukkot, have a meal of bread in the sukkah. All right, that's the first half of the Mishnah. Now, the second half of the Mishnah, it comes out from the way that Rebbe Eliezer talks now, is that he retracted his opinion. And that he retracted his opinion of having to have a meal, two meals a day, every day of Sukkot. And he agreed with the Chachamim that all the obligation of the Torah of eating in the Sukkah, that you have to make sure to eat in the Sukkah is only the first night. And to that, he now made the following comment. Rebbe Eliezer said something else. Somebody didn't eat the first night. Something happened. He didn't eat the first night. Yashlim belele yom tov ha'achra, and he can make it up on the other nights, on the night of the last day of Yontif. Now, literally reading this, it sounds like he's saying, if you didn't eat on the first night, the meal you were supposed to, you can make it up on the night of the last part of Yontif, which means on the night of Shmini Atzeres.
Or Hoshana Rabbah.
Leil Yontif Achron. Yom Tov Achron is Shmini Atzeres.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean specifically that. It really means if you missed the first night, you can make up even on the last day, even on Shmini Atzeres. And not only a night of Shmini Atzeres, a day of Shmini Atzeres. And really, any other day of Sukkot. The point according to Rebbe Eliezer is if you missed the first night, you have a chance to make it up. How do you make it up? You eat extra on the other night. You know, you work very hard. You make sure you eat something extra. Okay? And by doing that, by eating extra, that makes up. Now, what's this idea of making up? Where does it come from? So the explanation is that Rebbe Eliezer makes a comparison to the Korban Chagiga. There's a special Korban Chagiga, an obligation to bring festival Korban on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Now, the halacha is, if one failed to bring the Chagiga on the first day of Pesach or Shavuos, he can make up for his failure to do so by bringing it on one of the next 6 days. And in the case of Sukkot, he can bring the offering even on Shmini Atzeres. So that's halacha by Chagiga. Everybody agrees to that. The Korban Chagiga, which is a personal, there's a Korban Chagiga that everybody personally has to bring. If they don't bring it on the first day of Yontif, they have the rest of Yontif to make it up. Any other day of Yontif. And when it comes to Sukkot, you get an extra day to make it up because you have Shmini Atzeres. You have the 8th day Yontif. Now, according to Rebbe Eliezer, the same applies to the meal of the first night of Sukkot. If he missed that meal, he can make up for it by eating extra food on any of the remaining days of the festival, including Shmini Atzeres. He says the meals are you can make up the meal. That obligation you have to do on the first night. You can make it up any other night, any other day or night, similar to the Korban Chagiga. If you don't bring it on day one, you have the rest of the Yontif to bring it. And on Shavuos, forget about the rest of the Yontif. On Shavuos, you can have 6 more days afterwards, not even Shavuos anymore. Shavuos is only 1 day. But you still have a chance to make up from the Korban Chagiga for 6 days after.
By comparison to the other,
It's all Yontif. Now, that's Rebbe Eliezer opinion. You make up for it. The Chachamim say, there is no makeup for it. You miss it, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to make up for it. Al Zanamar, regarding this, the pasuk states, the verse states, Me'uvas lo yucha liskain, a twisted thing that cannot be straightened, the chesra lo yucha limanas, and a missing thing that cannot be counted. You can't make it up. If you missed the first night, you missed it, unfortunately. Have a wonderful day.
thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Missed the
Rabbi.
ship, you're on a train, you're out of business.